pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker for this morning. Katie Ortman Doble is here, and she's accompanied by her father, Dr. Ortman, who you will be hearing more about. Katie is a writer, motivational speaker, and a stage 4 cancer thriver. I like how she describes herself as a thriver. Katie was diagnosed with ocular melanoma, which left her blind in her left eye back in 2013. The following year, doctors discovered it had spread to her liver, and in 2018 to her brain. Doble credits a mix of integrative healing, positive attitude, and Western medicine for allowing her to thrive with cancer for over 6 years and counting. She navigates the latter with the support of her physician father, Dr. James Ortman, who has been instrumental in getting his daughter the best treatment available. Katie, I welcome you.
Hi everyone, it's an honor to be here today. First of all, I just would like to ask who missed the presentation, the keynote presentation yesterday morning? Okay, so it wasn't very good and the bar was set very low. So you didn't miss anything. Obviously I'm joking, Dr. Shapiro's talk was amazing and my dad and I were a little bit intimidated to be following that. When I asked my dad if he would join me today, he said to me, I don't know, Kate, I haven't really done anything. And I said to him, the only thing I have actually accomplished in this whole scenario is having cancer. And if it weren't for my dad and the support of the amazing team of doctors that he's built around me, the support of friends and family, and the support of the alternative medicine healers that I've worked with, I don't think I would still be here today. So today I'm going to tell you about my story of thriving with stage 4 cancer. And then I'm going to give a little advice that I like to give to peers and something that I think that medical professionals might like to hear as well. My husband and I have this weekend tradition where we go to Starbucks and we get a puppuccino with our dog Alice. It's the highlight of her life, and it's one of the highlights of mine as well. It's when my husband Nick and I have a chance to catch up from the week and just talk about what's going on in our lives. And there have been 3 major things that have had a big impact on who I am today. And I'll touch on all of those at some point during the presentation. And spoiler alert, one of them is cancer. And I just finished writing my memoir this year. And one day we were walking and my husband said to me, I don't even really know what your memoir is about. What's it about? And I said, it's about self-love. And he freaked out. And he said to me, Katie, you can't say that. And I looked at him and I said, what is self-love to you? Well, he's British, and that's when I learned what the British call masturbation. So to be clear, I'm not writing a how-to, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the stories that have impacted me and how I've been able to love myself through them. So I'll start from the beginning. Punctuality has always been a little bit of an issue of mine. And it all started on January 1st, 1982, when I missed the tax cut. Not only that, I was born later in the day, so I didn't win a lifetime supply of diapers or anything really cool for my family. I was my parents' 4th child and 3rd daughter. And as if all of those things were not enough, I was born during the opening kickoff of the 1982 Cornhusker Orange Bowl game against Clemson, and we lost. Sorry, Dad. Rough first day. But after that, my childhood was effortless, and apart from the wrath of my big brother Chris, whose life mission was to make my life a living hell, I had it really easy. We went to great schools, we lived in great neighborhoods, and we had a lot of fun. Saturdays were dad days, where my dad would give our poor mother a break from the 4 of us kids, and he'd take us swimming or golfing or to his mother's house for a hot dog lunch. And every night I would take my shower and I would climb the stairs down to my dad's study in the basement. And I would ask, this is me holding my hairdryer, Daddy, will you dry my hair? And this went on until probably maybe I was 10 years old. And every night he would dry my hair and we'd catch each other up on our days and we'd sing Que Sera, Sera. And those are some of my favorite memories from growing up. At 13 years old, my mom had been experiencing some stomach issues. And she went in for what was supposed to be a minor surgery. And when she woke up from anesthesia, she learned that she had pancreatic cancer. And since I'm talking to a room full of medical professionals, I don't have to spell that one out. I went to visit my mom that day after the surgery with my sister Julie. And my sister Julie and my dad and I left that night. And as we were in the parking lot, I lagged behind a little as a giant lump was forming in my throat. I couldn't not ask the question, but I was so scared to hear the answer. And so I finally asked, Dad, is Mom going to die? And my doctor dad, who had a definitive answer for everything, said, I don't know, Kate. My mom died 2 years and 2 days later, and my world was turned upside down. I found myself feeling completely isolated and alone in a way that I never had before. And even though I had my family, we were all kind of on our own grief islands, dealing with things in our own ways. I faked it though really well. I pulled off this I'm fine mentality, and I had a lot of friends and I kept really busy, but I wasn't dealing with the grief because I wasn't equipped to do it. As we all kind of started to move on, my sisters moved to Colorado, my dad remarried, my brother went away to college, and my dad had told me growing up, you can't wait for college, Kate. It's gonna be the time of your life and you're gonna meet your friends for life. And he was right. These are some of I'm Marge in this picture. And these are some of my closest friends to this day. And I found getting out of Omaha and having a space to grieve, I went to college in Minnesota, that I was finally starting to kind of heal a little bit more. And so I found myself feeling as happy as I was before my mom died. And my early 20s were easy, and dating was easy, and I was having a lot of fun. But at 25 years old, my second traumatic event hit in a way that I didn't expect. If any of you are Game of Thrones fans, you know the Walk of Atonement when Cersei walks through King's Landing and everyone yells at her, shame, shame, shame. I was a virgin at 25 years old. And through skin-to-skin contact, I'm sorry. I managed to contract an STD. And I had a serious boyfriend, and it was the most shameful, debilitating thing I'd ever experienced in my life. And that dark cloud that had finally lifted came back with a vengeance. And I found myself struggling so much. The isolation was worse than when my mom died because I couldn't talk about it with anyone. My biggest fear in life became somebody learning my dirty little secret. It got so bad that at one point I actually had to have surgery on my vagina. And I was struggling, and I didn't know how I was going to move on, and I knew that I needed to be close to family, so I moved to Colorado to be close to my sisters, who didn't even know what was going on. I had convinced myself that I didn't deserve love. I broke up with the guy that I had been with, and I moved to Colorado, and then I did it again. I'm fine. This is me on a night out. I'm at a Snuggie pub crawl wearing a fake butt, which is an Ortman family tradition. And I tried to convince everyone else again that I was okay, even though nobody knew what I was dealing with underneath the surface. I consider myself so lucky because I've had incredible medical professionals in my life, and it started with Dr. Zarlingo. He's an OBGYN here in Colorado, and I started to see him when I moved here. And I was going to his office monthly, if not weekly. The surgery had happened and the warts were still popping up, and it was awful. And I finally said to him one day, Dr. Z, this is in my head. It's all I ever think about, and I just think no man will ever love me. And he said to me, I'm going to give you the name and number of a very dear friend of mine who's a therapist. Her name is John Marie, and I want you to promise me that you will call her. I didn't do it right away, but I finally got the courage to call her. One of my favorite quotes from Brene Brown is, staying vulnerable is a risk we have to take if we want to experience connection. And I was feeling this isolation, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And so at 29 years old, in early 2011, I found myself sinking into the chair of John Marie's office. And while I thought we were just going to talk about the warts, the floodgates opened. And we started to talk about my mom and my relationships with my family members and all of the things that I just never properly dealt with because I wasn't equipped to. And I truly believe that those warts were my body's way of saying, you need to get help, Katie. You need to face these things you haven't been facing. So 4 years, those little suckers clung to my body. And less than 4 months sitting in John Marie's chair, the warts went away. I learned a very valuable lesson of the power of vulnerability and the power of the mind-body connection. And life was finally good again. Dating became easy, I had great friends, and I had a great career. Unfortunately, at 31 years old, I started experiencing some issues with my vision. And I went to see my ophthalmologist, and as I drove into his office that morning, my left bra strap snapped. And I foolishly said out loud, well, hopefully that's the worst thing that happens to me today. In less than 2 hours, I'd be diagnosed with ocular melanoma, a rare form of melanoma that affects 1 in 6 million. My doctor was talking to me, and I said to him, the ophthalmologist sent me to Dr. Hovland, who's a retina specialist, that morning. And so Dr. Hovland is diagnosing me with cancer. And I said to him, I can't even hear you. I can see your lips moving, but I cannot hear you. And he said to me, Katie, I want you to go home, and I want you to come back this afternoon with somebody. I will squeeze you in, but I want to make sure that you're hearing this with somebody else who can help you understand this information. So I called my sister Julie, who's a nurse, and she dropped everything and came to go with me to see this doctor. And she'd already done some research, and she was very quick to point out that it affects 6 in 1 million, and I'm not that special. So leave it to your siblings to kind of put you in your place when you're going through that. We called my dad after the appointment, and he was golfing. And he said to his friends, go ahead and pick up my ball. And in my mind, I thought, oh my gosh, my dad just skipped a hole of golf for me. This must be really serious. And I also thought, I must be really loved. And then when I told him this later, he said, oh, Katie, I was having the worst round of my life. I was so excited to get to skip a hole. Thanks. So Dr. Hovland told me 3 things were going to happen. They were going to scan my body to make sure it hadn't spread anywhere else because it typically metastasized to the liver or the lungs. They would do radiation treatment targeted to my eyeball, and then they would biopsy the cells during the procedure to find out if we were dealing with high or low risk cells. Well, thankfully the scan was clear, and when I went in for radiation, I created a private Facebook page, and I invited all of my friends and family to post pictures wearing eye patches that day to show their support. And then this ended up being my holiday card that year. There are a lot of dogs and babies, if you can't see them. It was pretty fun. I ended up losing 100% of my vision in my left eye. But a couple months later, I got the amazing news that I was a 1A, that the biopsy results show that my cells were as low risk as possible, and there was a less than 2% chance of metastatic disease. I experienced a life high, and I was just elated with this news. Later that year, I met and fell in love with my husband, Nick. And a year later, he was ring shopping the weekend before Thanksgiving with my sisters because he is a very clever man. And after they found a ring, they went to lunch and they talked about how he was going to propose. And he decided that he was going to propose to me on Thanksgiving Day in front of my friends and family. Meanwhile, it was nearing year end, and I was thinking about all of the things I had left to do before my deductible reset. And so I set up an appointment to get my liver ultrasound, which was part of my follow-up care. I was getting these ultrasounds every 6 months, and I realized it had been 7 months since my last one, which had been clear. So I called, and I got my appointment, and I went in Tuesday morning before Thanksgiving. And that afternoon, I was sitting in my client's office, and I could feel my phone vibrating in my pocket. And then the person called again, and I wondered what's going on. So I left my client's office, and I crawled into my car, and I listened to a voicemail. And this is what I was thinking. Because the voicemail was from the oncologist herself. Nobody wants to get that phone call. And she said, Katie, I need you to call me back ASAP. So I called her back practically panting. And she told me that there were about 12 lesions on my liver, that it was likely that I was that 2%, and that they needed to biopsy me ASAP to get this taken care of. So I called my dad, and he was on a plane on Thanksgiving morning to be with me Thanksgiving Day and to be with me for the biopsy the following day. Thanksgiving morning, I woke up in the fetal position, still crying as I'd been the last 48 hours, unsure of how I would face my family and friends that day, this new cancer-stained holiday. And so when we arrived, we went into the backyard and we were taking some family photos, and then suddenly this production unfolded, and Nick is down on one knee, and Mikey in the center here is photobombing the entire engagement. And so it was the most emotional day of my life. I was so high and so low, and I was so happy because I knew that no matter what, I could face this knowing that Nick was my forever. The biopsy confirmed the next day what we suspected, and while Nick and I were making plans to get married and move in together, my dad was spending every waking moment doing research, presenting my case to the Tumor Board of Nebraska, and talking to any doctor in America who would give him insight on what was the next best move for us. I met with my oncologist here locally, and we talked about starting Yervoy, which was the only FDA-approved drug at the time. I asked her about doing clinical trials, and she said to me, that would be really expensive. And in my mind, I thought, if I die trying, that's not my problem. And who are you to say what it's worth for my family to put up this fight? My dad got us an appointment at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and I called the doctor's office to cancel my Yervoy treatment. And I never heard back from that doctor ever again. And I think if she saw me now, she would probably be surprised to see me. My dad, Nick, and I went to Sloan Kettering, as we did many times in 2015, to meet with the doctors, learn about the protocol, and we learned that I was eligible for this trial and I needed to go back the following week to get some blood work done and a million tests. And so my brother went back with me the following week. It was right before New Year's, and it was a crazy day, running from building to building and being poked and prodded and having all of these tests done. And as we were flying through the airport that night to try to catch our flight, my brother turned around to me and he said, "You're welcome, Katie." And I caught up to him and I said, "Well, what am I thanking you for?" And he said, "You know, I was a real asshole to you growing up, and I just feel like if not for me, you wouldn't really have the grit you have, you know? I just feel like," and I said, "So let me get this straight. All of my courage and all of my bravery in this is all you." And he said, "Yeah, so you can thank him later." We got into town for New Year's Eve, and as we rang in the new year and I celebrated my 33rd birthday with very, very dear friends, I literally was thinking to myself, will I see 34 years? Those first couple of weeks without a plan were actually worse than the diagnosis itself. I just felt so out of control, and that anxiety was horrible. When I got into the trial at New York City, my anxiety leveled out. And the first 5 weeks, I had intense blood work every single week, so I made the choice to live in New York City for 5 weeks. I didn't expect it to be as fun as it was. I had 9 different visitors while I was there. I worked full-time out of my company's Midtown office, and I actually had an amazing time. I found myself smiling all the time as I would be walking to work and hanging out with friends. And I just felt, I was feeling the strength coming back. And so while the treatment was incredibly tough, I just felt solid knowing that we had a plan and that Nick and I had a plan for our lives. 2 weeks after I got home from New York City, we had a shotgun wedding, as one of my coworkers was telling everybody, because she doesn't know what a shotgun wedding means. Told her she needed to go ahead and correct that, because people were probably thinking, oh my gosh, she has stage 4 cancer and she's pregnant. For 8 months, I traveled back and forth from New York City to Denver, and for what I called my drug deal, to pick up my medication. And in August, growth in my tumors got me booted from that trial. My dad's going to go into more detail on the trials that I've experienced since and where I stand now. What I want to talk about now is the advice that I like to give when I find someone is newly diagnosed with cancer. The biggest thing that I did for myself was I kept living my life. I think I honestly have done more in the past 5 years than I would have done had I never gotten cancer. It's a very liberating way to live. We travel a lot. We got married. We built a house. I've continued working. We didn't get to our timing isn't always what we want it to be. We got married in 2015, and in this first picture, it's on our honeymoon, which happened to fall on National Eye Patch Day, a big favorite day of mine. And Nick and I finally got to take this honeymoon in 2017. I've been Rocky Mountain climbing and skydiving, and I just say yes to things. I do more than I ever used to do before. I also have been very calculated in my communication. I use Caring Bridge to update all of my friends and family on my treatments and what's going on. And it's just taken such a load off me and my family to not have to tell all of the different people asking and have a place for them to go and get information. When I lost my hair, I didn't expect to lose my hair. It ended up happening in 2016, and I was starting to look like a baby bird, as you can see in this picture. And so I took control over that. I decided that I wanted to shave my head, and I wanted to make it a joyful celebration. So my sister Julie came over with her sons Pete and Tommy, who was 7 at the time, did a #1 on his head. He was so excited to be able to show his support. My husband did a #2 on his head. My dad did as well, and so did my father-in-law and my brother-in-law and 2 of my brothers. And so it was a really great way for the men in my life to show their support in a way that I didn't want any of the women in my life to show. And when I shaved my head that night, I looked in the mirror, and for the first time I saw my mom staring back at me. It was just a very intimate moment because it was the most physical thing that I remember her experiencing that I was then experiencing. And last week my brother said to me, I pulled your hair out way before chemo did. I use the term #CancerPerk for things that I see as the silver lining in cancer, and there are endless cancer perks. My favorite one is through an organization called First Descents. They're located here in Denver, Colorado, and they provide the healing power of adventure to young adults impacted by cancer. And so through First Descents, I have gone kayaking for a week in Tarkio, Montana. I did a yoga retreat this summer in Croatia, and they do local trip events, and they're constantly keeping us connected. There's a Facebook group where I can go when I'm struggling and I know nobody else in my world can understand. Other cancer perks include, and I am not joking, warm blankets at the hospital are no joke. They are one of my favorite things about having cancer. Through an organization called Do It for the Love, I got to meet Kenny Chesney last year. And then this guy pictured here is named Ron. Ron and I had chemo together in 2016, and he and I just really hit it off after a couple of hours sitting in the chair and comparing our bald heads and talking about what we do to stay alive. And so we've maintained this friendship, and he invited Nick and me over for dinner with him and his wife one night, and he painted me this beautiful picture. So I have strengthened relationships, new friends. I have the courage to drop the toxic friends in my life. And again, it's just teaching me to live in a very different way. I totally used the cancer card to get my job, and it worked. And Alice always has had a brown eye and a blue eye. And when I had cataract surgery a couple years ago, they didn't put a lens on my eye because I am blind in my eye. And the dead tumor particles came through the center and changed my eye brown. And I went to see Dr. Hovland, and you could tell he was thinking, oh my gosh, is she gonna sue me? And I said, it's okay. They say you start to look like your dog. And he was just so happy to see a smile on my face. So this is Alice and me. Kind of similar to that, who wore it best? I love to play this game, and so when I lost my hair, we would take pictures as a family, and then as my hair was very awkwardly growing out, I realized one day, oh my God, my hair looks exactly like my dad's did in the 80s. So I put this on social media, and it's always very well received. So a big thing for me is self-love, and I was talking about this with a friend recently, and I was talking about how so many doctors have, when I brought up diet, when I brought up things that I think I could maybe do to improve my health, I've had doctors roll their eyes at me or tell me, no, that doesn't matter. And so a friend of mine said to me, don't poo-poo the woo-woo. And it's so true. There's so many different things as patients that we feel like we can be doing to have control. And so I always ask myself, I always say to myself, it may not help, but it's not gonna hurt me. And if that's the case, then what does it matter if your patients are doing essential oils or acupuncture or something that you might not understand? So just let them do what they're gonna do. Obviously, if it's hurting them, then you can have a conversation. But I also do this in addition to my Western medicine. This isn't something I'm doing as a substitute. So other things that I do for self-love and to really take care of myself, I eat very healthy. I work out. This is a picture. I actually was introduced to aerial fitness through a First Descents event, and I've continued with this activity. Humor is a huge defense mechanism for me. Laughter is the best medicine, unless you have cancer. This was my meme a couple years ago for Halloween. It made a lot of people really uncomfortable, but it also made a lot of people laugh. And then of course when my hair fell out, someone gave me a t-shirt, I'm too sexy for my hair, and I would wear that around so proudly, and again, some people liked it and some people didn't. I still go to therapy as needed. I've maintained a no Google policy. I've never once Googled my cancer. I understand I'm very lucky to have a doctor father to do the Googling for me. I do Reiki, I work with different energy healers, I do acupunctures, I do affirmations and meditation every single day. I get a lot of sleep and I still drink my wine. So the biggest thing I will say about cancer is that it's given me gratitude. It's taught me so much, and I'm living as a different person than I was pre-cancer, and I like this version of myself better. Cancer doesn't define me. How I handle it does. And because I have finally put in the work and understand the American meaning of self-love, I'm not just fine anymore, I truly am thriving. My life goals are to share pints with my nephews and nieces at their 21st birthdays and to dance with them at their weddings. And in keeping with my punctuality issues, I intend to be decades late for my funeral. My dad is up next. He's going to give more insight on what he's been dealing with on his side. But thank you all very much. These are how you can follow me on social media and a link to my blog where I post a lot of tips and tricks for cancer patients. So thank you all very much.
I'm Katie's dad. I practice internal medicine and geriatrics in Omaha. I do a lot of nursing home work, and I'm medical director for Kindred Hospice. You don't hear too many people say that they're grateful for having cancer. But I think if you look back on the main obstacles in your life's journey and reflect honestly, usually there is a little bit of a silver lining. Katie asked me a year ago if I would do some talks with her like this, and I thought about it for a minute and said, no, I really am not interested. And then she asked me a few months ago about doing this one. And since it was in Denver, I said, well, I'll think about it. I looked at the program and saw that there were concurrent sessions, so I figured, at most there'd be 30, 40 people that would talk. And so imagine my surprise when I look at the final draft and see that we're giving the keynote address. I also was a little bit intimidated yesterday attending Dr. Shapiro's talk. I spent the whole afternoon trying to figure out how I could incorporate some sound effects into my presentation. For those of you that have teens and preteens, I just want to go over something Katie talked about a lot. When Katie was 10 and Chris was 12, their sole purpose in life was to antagonize the other one, to get the other one in trouble. And they truly are now the best of friends. So there is hope for your families. My main purpose today is to explain how I helped Katie navigate through the maze of treatments and trials to deal with her cancer, and also to encourage you and challenge you to do the best job you can when you're dealing with these vulnerable people who have received a life-changing diagnosis. Katie had a good model at an early age for dealing with cancer with grace and dignity. Anne had about a 2-month history of vague pelvic pains and mild weight loss. When she finally went to the doctor, she had a normal pelvic ultrasound. About 2 weeks later, when the symptoms persisted, she was scheduled for a laparoscopic diagnostic laparoscopy. It was at 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. We figured we'd be home for lunch. I think it was about 11 when one of the surgical nurses came in to tell me that they had to do a hysterectomy. I can't remember whether she mentioned cancer or not, but I was, of course, concerned and suspicious. Shortly thereafter, I was notified that a general surgeon had been called in. When Dr. Munson and Dr. Chupp, who were colleagues and friends of mine, finally came in to talk to me at about 4 o'clock, they explained how they'd done a hysterectomy, ovariectomy, omentectomy, and I remember to this day Dr. Munson's words. There was a 2-centimeter primary in the body of the pancreas, and Jim, you know what that means. Now, fortunately, a few days later, the path report came back, and it was a neuroendocrine tumor, which comprised 5% of pancreatic cancers. At the time, it had a prognosis of median survival of 2 years, which is exactly how long Anne lived, versus the run-of-the-mill adenocarcinoma that, as you know, probably has a 5 or 6 month prognosis. During that time, she underwent round after round of different combinations of chemotherapy, all of which made her miserable. The usual scenario, she'd right about the time she was starting to feel better, it'd be time for the next treatment. Finally, when nothing worked, she was enrolled in a trial at the John Wayne Cancer Center in LA. Back then, things seemed a little different because we didn't have to go out there until the final stage of the trial. She had 3 leukaphereses in Omaha, where they take your blood and spin off the white cells and reinfuse the blood. And then these, as I understood it at the time, they would expose these white blood cells to the tumor and then reinfuse them into the body to help fight the tumor. I mean, it sounds to me very much like what's going on right now, but it was a very early stage. In retrospect, the trials did not work at all. So we were supposed to go to LA on a Thursday, June 5th. I came home from work at noon on Monday, and we had a heart-to-heart talk. At that time, Anne probably weighed about 80 pounds. She used to joke that regarding the weight loss, that you have to watch what you wish for. Remission. And then came back to the University of Colorado, and she underwent a few more trials there. Again, none of which seemed to really help that much. Finally, she underwent a radioembolization, which did seem to give some good relief and remission for 3 years until recently. To that in a minute. There was a little hiccup about 18 months ago when Katie called me one day and said she had some disequilibrium, some generalized weakness, some numbness in her face and fingertips, excuse me. This was concerning, of course, and she went to her doctor. It just lasted about a day and disappeared. It didn't come back. She went to her doctors, and an MRI, in fact, showed a lesion in the brainstem. The neuroradiologist told us that if he looked at the scan cold, he would have thought it was a small stroke. But Katie's was 30-something and had no risk factors.
and you can't biopsy the brainstem. So she had gamma knife treatment, which has been successful. Now, Katie was getting scans every 3 months, and the last one on September 30th showed regrowth of her tumor after 3 years of stability. So she went to Dr. Rayoff at University of Colorado, and then she was going through New York on another trip last Monday, and was able to get into Dr. Carvajal, who gave an outline of the various potential therapies and routes we could take. And I wasn't at that meeting with her, but he was very positive, and there were so many more choices than there had been the last time we talked to him 6 months ago. I met with her 2 days ago in Pittsburgh, and we met with a Dr. Kamula, who, it was so cool. He said to Katie, he said, I feel like I know you because I've talked about your case for so long. Because probably she's a 1A who metastasized, and also because she'd had this prolonged remission. And he knew Dr. Hovland, he knew Dr. Rayoff, he knew Dr. Carvajal, and it was so neat. And he spent an hour with us, gave this methodical presentation, and as it went on, you could just tell he was so excited that she was such a good candidate for this TIL therapy, which is an immune therapy that sounds very much like what they were trying to do to Anne, 25 years ago, except it's like light years advanced from what it was then and what we know. One of my main roles in this process was to review the study protocols, especially regarding side effects. Katie did not want to know anything about potential side effects. So if she had any symptoms, she would call me, and I would tell her whether it was relevant to the study and what she should do. Now, some people need to know everything, but I just want to point out that there are these differences and they need to be respected. Obviously, Katie's very much into complementary therapy, and I like your usual position that she was alluding to, and been a little more skeptical. I didn't even know what Reiki was. I was out having beers with friends one night, and I accidentally called it Roku. I got a little grief about that. I was in town when she had an appointment with Dr. Career, who's about nutrition. And I got to tag along as long as I promised not to make any negative comments. It turns out that Dr. Career is a really neat guy, and he's an internist who had been in charge of a Denver ICU when he decided in midlife to do a fellowship in Arizona in complementary medicine. And he specialized in nutrition, and he really had very firm, positive ideas about how diet and dietary supplements are useful in treating cancer. He's still very prominent locally, and he's still practicing regular medicine as chief of medicine at Sky Ridge Medical Center, and still doing his nutrition gig on the side together. A couple of points I just want to reiterate about complementary medicine. One is that cancer patients are told, you have to do this study, you have to do this, take this medicine, you need this test, you need this scan. They don't feel control. And complementary medicines, I think Katie talked about, give them that sense of control, and that's really important. The second thing is that it's complementary medicine, and it's to be used with, not instead of proven medicines that or proven trials. Some of you may remember years ago there was the apricot pit chemical was supposed to be a cancer cure. Anybody remember that? Anne? Okay, you. And people would go to Mexico and get this in lieu of conventional treatment. So obviously that's ridiculous. You know, it's an understatement to say that the cancer treatment today is complicated and ever-changing. And so I think we have to do the best we can to help these folks get to an oncologist that is up to date and knows what's going on, and that's really important. The financing cancer treatment is an issue. Most of the current newer treatments cost on average like $10,000 a month. And if it's an approved drug, insurance will cover this, but what about those people that don't have insurance? I think that these social issues are on the program here in this venue of this conference for a couple conferences later today. I know that there's many different disciplines in the audience today, and many different roles that you play in taking care of cancer patients. And I just ask you to remember that these patients, most of them don't have a dad who can help them navigate through this treatment maze, and many can't afford to go to New York and to Pittsburgh to get into trials. But we have to do the best we can to treat them with care and concern, to hold their hands, treat them like family, and help them get to the best treatment available. Thank you.